Music serves as a universal language that connects people on a profound, intangible level. But how do musicians do this? I'm Warren Buchholz, jazz brand manager at WUSF, and I'm on a mission to find out.
Podem me chamar e me pedir e me rogar, e podem mesmo falar mal, ficar de mal que não faz mal. My name is Daniela Soledade, and I play guitar, flute, and I sing.
My name is Nate Najar, and I play the guitar.
Meet Daniela and Nate, a bossa nova duo dedicated to sharing authentic Brazilian-style jazz with audiences across the globe. They're currently touring their latest show, Love and Bossa Nova, which began in the pandemic on Zoom and quickly transformed into a live concert series. They're performing on April 23rd at the Palladium in St. Pete. I got to sit down with them in the WUSF Loraine, Rubis, and Neil Franckle studio to talk more about their show. I hope you enjoy. Who inspired both of you to want to get into the life of music?
Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Vai lá,
I'll go first. So I was born and raised in Rio, in Brazil, and I have a family that was very artistic. My grandfather was a composer, and he composed with Antônio Carlos Jobim, Vinícius de Moraes. He's from that wonderful era. And he also had a nightclub in Copacabana called Zoom Zoom.
Oh, that's cool.
That was like one of the incubators of Bossa Nova. So that was the environment my dad grew up in. And so he also became a musician and a producer and a composer, arranger. And I grew up going to studios with him. So it's a family affair. But he produced shows on our main network, TV cable called Globo.
Oh.
And so he produced shows sometimes that had kids' voices. Anything that had a kid voice, I ended up in the studio, right?
There you go.
So I sung in jingles, commercials, just different recordings for different shows. And that was a lot of fun. But my dad worked with, the artists he worked with are just all of the, all of my idols, really. And so he worked at a very high level in Rio, because everybody who came through Rio in those decades, in the 80s, and everybody who came through Rio, came through Brazil, ended up recording in Rio.
Gotcha.
Because Rio had all the studios, all the best studios. So my dad was emancipated to be able to play gigs when he was 14 years old. So he was full in, And so it was really, really fun to grow up with him, because we would have get-togethers in his house, and my friends would come over, and we all played an instrument, right? A lot of guitar players, but, flute players, whatever, multiple instruments. My dad plays bass, and we would just play all night. It was so much fun. But back to my grandfather, like I said, he produced shows and he composed, and he actually composed songs that became like children's classics.
Oh, okay.
Called Noah's Ark, Arca de Noé. He composed that with Vinícius de Moraes, and those are some of the kid songs that I grew up with, that are known by everybody. So he has a really nice legacy of music that he left and remained in Brazilian music history. You know what I mean? Yeah. But when I was 13, I was downtown in Rio, and I saw this band. I don't remember the full instrumentation, but I remember, obviously there was probably a pandeiro and a guitar and just the Brazilians, but there was this one guy with this big curly long hair playing flute. And I was like, wow, I want to do that, right? That was like that moment. Yeah. So I got a scholarship in the Conservatory Villa Lobos in Rio. And at 13, I chose flute as my instrument, because you had one basic instrument. So that was my first one. But in that school, I took, it was like a full conservatory. So you took art, history classes, theory classes, singing, choir, all kinds of classes besides your instruments. Yeah. So that was really special because I learned a lot, of course. And then I moved here after that. So
what made you want to move here?
So my mother, when she was a teenager, she lived in Maryland for 2 years,
all right.
15 through 17, because her dad was in the military.
So
he came here to train the army how to jump out of airplanes with parachutes.
That's very cool.
So she lived here for 2 years. And during these 2 years, she went to high school in Maryland, and she had a little boyfriend who 25 years later came looking for her in Brazil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
25 years later.
25 years later, and he was Cuban and American. So they had an immediate spark.
Oh, good.
And he lived with us in Rio for 1 year.
That's
and
like
then
a rom-com.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, they have their prom picture. It's really cute.
Oh.
Yeah. But then they decided to move to Tampa.
I see.
And I had no say. I was 16 years old, and I was angry.
I don't want to come to Tampa.
I was angry.
Who wants to come to
The
Tampa?
first 3 years, I suffered a little. I mean, think about the culture shock, right? I was
Absolutely.
going camping, going to Ipanema Beach every day, getting together. All my friends played music. I was like in heaven in Rio. So it was hard, but eventually I got used to it and learned to enjoy it and love it. And I actually live in St. Pete now, and I love St. Pete. But, one of the best things that happened, too, is that I got to meet Nate Najar. I would not have met Nate if I didn't come to the United States. So I'm grateful.
I grew up in St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm a product of the Pinellas County school system, and I had a lot of great band directors. When I was in middle school, I played in the concert band, and I said, I'll play the string bass. And they gave me the tuba parts. And then when I was in high school, I said, I'll play the snare drum so I could be in marching band, And but I loved the guitar, and I wanted to be a guitar player. And I got this great guitar teacher in South St. Pete. He's gone now. He died about 20 years ago, named Frank Mullen. And Carl Amundsen, the other guitar player in our band, great guitar player. Carl was a student of Frank's back then. That's where I met Carl all the way back then, as we had the same kind of guitar tutelage for many years, and there were guitar ensembles, and there was arranging, and it was like a guitar community when you studied with Frank. And so Carl's a few years older than I am, but we're all teenagers, we're in our early 20s, and we're going to be jazz guitar players. I want to be like Barney Kessel. I want to be like Jim Hall or Herb Ellis, And so that's what we decided life was going to be like, and here we are.
You've played with some powerhouses here in St. Pete. I mean, John Lamb, Buster Cooper. You kind of grew up with some of the greats around here. Can you tell me more about your collaborations with them?
Oh yeah, it was really wonderful. I mean, just what an opportunity, what an experience. The funny thing about me is I was just dying to play. I couldn't play my way out of a paper bag, but I was just dying to play. I wanted to be part of this thing that was happening. And so, I'd go sit in anywhere. I'd go up and down the beach and sit in with the blues bands, and then this teenager, go, hey, can I sit in with you guys? Sure. So John Lamb, he, as sort of a social thing, as sort of an enrichment thing, John took guitar classes with Frank Mullen as well, and they were old friends going back through the 70s when they both landed back in St. Pete. And John's lesson was right before mine, and mine was the last lesson of the night. So at one point, kind of in the early 2000s, John would be leaving his lesson, and I'd be coming in. And there was one night where he said, hey, because he just lived down the street from Frank. He was just a few blocks down the street in the same neighborhood. And Buster lived a few doors down from John. And But one night John said, "Hey, why don't you come over to the crib? I got this new wine somebody gave me. And it sort of became a little bit of a habit that after my guitar lesson, I'd go over to John's and we'd drink wine and listen to records. And I had my little trio at the time playing around town. I played little restaurants, wherever I could find a gig. And we have a really fine bass player in town named Steve Boysen, who he's a stalwart on the jazz scene. And Steve and I are great friends going way back. We met in a pit orchestra playing 3 weeks of Damn Yankees. And so Steve was the bass player, the regular bass player in my trio. He's on a few records that I did. And we have this running joke where sometimes, since John and I had begun this relationship, and then maybe we'd start playing some tunes at the house when sometimes on a certain kind of gig, I would think, oh, you know what? I'm going to ask John to play this gig. And so the running joke was I'd call Steve and I'd say, now don't get mad, but I asked John to do this gig. And 20 years later, we call, now don't get mad. It's really a nice joke. And God, Steve's such a great guy and a wonderful bass player. So that kind of began. I started doing things with John, and then John and I got asked to do a restaurant gig in St. Pete, just the two of us. That was kind of fairly steady. This was at a place called Cafe Alma years ago, and that's sort of where it began. And we started kind of working out arrangements. And in my mind, the template was like Gene Bertoncini and Michael Moore, or Lorenzo Almeida and Ray Brown. There was some really, really interesting kind of acoustic nylon string guitar and bass duos of people I really admired how they approached the music and what they did. And so John and I kind of got a thing going. And I was young and absorbing a lot. Yeah. And so, I paid attention to the things we did that maybe he seemed to enjoy. And I would kind of, I'd pay attention to what we talked about, and then I'd go work something up. I'd work up an old Ellington thing that maybe he seemed to have an affinity for. And I'd try to come up with some kind of band arrangement or something where, and the interesting part is the best stuff was where what I could figure out, if I do it this way, he's going to react this way. Mm-hmm. And so now we don't have to work anything out. Nobody has to write anything and say, this is your part, this is my part. But it organically becomes sort of a composed thing, mm-hmm. right? And so we built up a kind of a repertoire of specialities, and we had a great time. And, I'll tell you, 15 years of having that beat right on my left ear. Definitely. Is, and the voice leading, the way that he would play through the harmony, the way that John relates to the different ways to connect the dots, so to speak. And, me having learned, okay, well, this harmony, this chord goes to this chord goes to, and so forth. But then hearing that and correlating what the knowledge was versus what I'm hearing this guy from the generation of the creators of this stuff, how he related to playing through it. And just what a treasure to have had that opportunity to spend all those years playing with him.
So magical. And
yeah.
What a privilege to be able to just...
And then all the hanging out that we did. Yeah. Nobody can hang harder than John. He's 92 this year, and he can out hang anybody. And the amount of hanging we did, and so the life experience stuff, not just musical, but just the stuff about relating to existence and relating to the world, and John Lamb is a historical treasure.
Definitely. What differences have you found playing, say, jazz or bossa nova in Rio versus here, or a different country versus here? What differences have you found?
Wow, that's a good question.
That is a good question, because there are many different layers of differences. You have the difference of the audience. You have the difference of the culture of the place. You have the difference of the venues and how things are run. There's so many things, right?
And all that kind of informs how the people relate to what it is you're doing, and even the preconceptions about what it is. So, like in North America, it's often a jazz audience. And a jazz audience relates to bossa nova and Brazilian music through a particular lens of specific repertoire, of specific aesthetics, right?
Girl from Ipanema.
And
All the time.
what's
Yes.
really nice is that a jazz audience is used to listening to something like a tenor saxophone. So if Daniela's singing in Portuguese, they can sit back and go, yeah, I feel this.
It's a different energy.
Yeah. But, we also see, which is really, really nice. I'm so grateful for this. We see an eclectic music lover audience as well. And they have less preconceptions about what they expect it to be or what they expect it to sound like, and kind of a more, wow, okay, cool, this is amazing, and that's really hip, and I love when those audiences combine. And then we also get Brazilians in North America, and playing for the Brazilians is amazing because when you play certain repertoire, it's just like the sky opens up, and
A lot of dancing.
yeah, and the singing along, and because of the shared repertoire, and so that's some of the most special moments is when we'll play because sometimes we'll play like a rock club, 200-300 seat rock club, and that show will have some bossa nova and some samba and some MPB, which is like it's música popular brasileira, Brazilian popular music, but it's really adult contemporary. Gotcha. It's really it's like it's Sade, it's Anita Baker, it's Huey Lewis and the News. It's it's whatever generation grown up pop music, right? And so MPB is like a really big cauldron. And so if we play a rock club, we'll do these shows sometimes where we do this big kind of potpourri of aesthetic, and the audience is a big potpourri of these different sort of, I don't want to call them tribes, but these different relatable backgrounds coming together. And the mix, the way the energy mixes is really special. It's really fascinating, and anyway, I could go on. Why don't you talk about Brazil or something?
And then you have it's so much fun to see different venues too. For example, in Paris, we play in this venue that's like a little, a classic little Parisian jazz club. It's kind of like a cave. And then the green room is like you go down these really steep stairs and it's all rock, and you get down there and you're like in a cave with the barrels, next to you. So everywhere is also an adventure of places we're gonna see, and of course we get to meet the people. We get to meet the guys who are engineering the show, and so you meet the different personalities, and it's really fun to meet all these different people, and also of course the audience that comes out. It's also really exciting to meet audiences from different parts of the world because you get to listen to interesting people, all around.
Yeah. Well, like Brazil, for instance. We did this thing in Beco das Garrafas, which is like the cradle of Bossa Nova. It's a little club down an alley in Copacabana. And, everybody got their start there. It was the place you played in the 50s and 60s in Rio. And it was like a Bossa Nova homecoming. It was really special. Berta Menescal showed up, and Antonio Adolfo showed up, and Marcel Powell showed up, and Renato Teixeira showed up.
That's right.
And we did a couple of shows, and so the house turned over because it's a small room. And Brazil, Bossa Nova was a point in history in Brazil. And it was just a blip in history. And what's interesting is that what Bossa Nova really is it was the melding of the national music of the country, which is samba. And, samba is a living and breathing art form that exists today, not in a repertory preserved state, but in a living, breathing dynamic state. Samba is, and the population, they sing samba, they dance samba, they share the repertoire, they write new samba that becomes new shared repertoire, and it's everywhere you go. It's in the street, it's in the bar, it's in the cafe, and so Bossa Nova was sort of the taking of this grand national art form and playing it intimately for the people you love nearby. Playing it in the apartment at a party while we're trying to be quiet because we don't want to wake up the neighbors. We're not having a festa. We're chilling out. But we're still sambistas, but we're chilling out right now. So we're, and João Gilberto's really figured out how to distill the essence of samba instrumentally into something you can hold in your pocket. He played the partido alto and he played the sordo. The partido alto is the high part, and that's kind of what the tambourine plays. And so this way of interpreting into a guitar where you could sit on the sofa and sing a love song to this girl that you're trying to get into bed with, And this is at a time when...
Is that what you did?
What can I say to you, Daniela? And so at the same time, this is the post-war era, and these Western ideals of a lot of different things are being spread around the globe, and there's an emerging middle class in Brazil, and so now you have young people going to college and having leisure time and hanging out and there's this kind of, it was happening here too, with the sort of rise of the intellectual. The social scene kind of came out of the apartments and into the nightclubs and bars, and jazz records were starting to come to Brazil, and so the bossa novistas were listening to jazz records and taking down some things from them. And you got to tell them about Maneshka and that one record, but I gotta get a few more things out first. So this thing with bossa nova happened at a time, and Jobim was of an era. He was a bridge of an era between the Ari Barroso and the Caymmi kind of nationalistic Brazilian music thing, and the jazz and commercial, because the other thing is you got commercial music happening. The record industry is beginning. The radio industry is becoming mature. And so now musicians are getting jobs playing in nightclubs, they're playing in hotel lobbies, they're playing on the radio. Guys are writing sambas, but they don't know how to write it down. And music is an industry, and there's money to be made in the publishing, in the use of songs. And this is the time when everybody wants new songs, because Jobim had a job working for the publisher where the sambistas would come in and sing their song, and he'd transcribe it for the publisher, right? So that continued to happen, and bossa nova became one of the components, just like samba and classical music and American rock and roll. Bossa nova became a component of Brazilian popular music that emerged the same way American popular music emerged in the 60s and so forth. So now there's no more bossa nova in Brazil. There's just, you've got a music industry same as you got here, and it's moved on.
I see.
But in North America, it was exported a little and people liked it, and they tried, there was this it hit the shores really in 1962. Charlie Bird and Stan Getz did jazz samba, because Charlie got a bunch of João Gilberto records when he was in Brazil, and he started playing that stuff at home at the Showboat in 18th Street and Columbia Road in D.C. And so they made that record, and Desfinato became a big hit. That kind of started the wave, right? And October 1962, they produced this big Brazilian concert at Carnegie Hall. Antonio Carlos Jobim, João Gilberto, Os Cariocas, Sergio Mendes was on it, and it was like, oh, here's this explosion. That was released on record. Humberto Maneshka was on it, and so that was released on record, and that was like, okay, so now Brazilian music's coming, and so the next step was Getz Gilberto, and they do it, and what they knew to be true, what Creed Taylor wanted. Creed Taylor produced the record for Verve. They wanted The Girl from Ipanema in English, right? And they had an English lyric, and João was, I'm not going to sing it, but Astrugi can sing it, She speaks English and she's a good singer, so she can sing it. So she did it, and they put it out, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Tall and tan and young and lovely, the girl from Ipanema goes walking.
Outside of Brazil, Bossa Nova became this aesthetic that it's, I hate to say it, but it's, and I don't hate to say it. I hate to say it for, whatever. It's just like Margaritaville.
Yeah.
It really is. It's this whole thing wrapped up in this beautiful ephemeral bubble of this amazing music. And then, of course, the jazz community took the rhythm and the melody and the harmony and the way that this stuff was related, and they did their thing with it and explored it and continue to explore it in a really meaningful way, and then because of the cross-pollination with the Brazilian musicians becoming interested in jazz, and so the guys, there's what a wonderful Brazilian musician community we have in the New York jazz community of jazz musicians, but they relate to it from a Brazilian root. It's just what a magnificent thing.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Life can be noisy, so be sure to take a break with some jazz. Visit WUSFjazz.org to find local performances, jazz events near you, curated Spotify playlists, and a whole lot more. Don't stress out, listen to jazz at WUSFjazz.org.
Roberto Menescal, who's he's like a generation after the Jobim generation,
okay.
But he knows Jobim, met Jobim, knows Jobim. But he's the composer of Little Boat, O Barquinho. So he wrote some classics himself, and he's like just part of that initial crew that created Bossa Nova too. So you had artists like Nara Leão, Roberto Menescal, Baden-Powell, exactly. So this group used to get together once a week in Nara's apartments. They're all young teenagers, so they still lived with their parents. So her parents allowed her once a week to have this get-together every Thursday with her friends, and they would provide the little snacks and the little soda and stuff. But they'd get together, and her parents also had jazz records that they brought when they traveled to the United States, which were very hard to get in Brazil at the time. But because Nara's parents had them, they would just get together and listen to these records when they had these hangs. Yeah. And so Menescal told us the story because he was one of the people there. He said there was one record that was really influential for them. It was Julie London's "Julie Is Her Name."
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he said when they heard that record, they all were crazy about Barney Castle's guitar playing. So they said, we have to transcribe this record. Let's do this. Each one of us learns 2 songs, and we're going to meet again in a month so that we can play through the album. Yeah. So you learn 2, you learn 2, you learn 2, you learn 2. Okay. So he said they got back together and they played through the album, and he says, and that is how Brazilian music evolved 10 years in 1 month. Because, of course, Barney's harmonies and all the things that they could inherit from that album. So that was a really cool story. And then, of course, sometimes we tell the story in live shows too, and then we'll sing his favorite song of the album, which is Cry Me a River.
Cry Me a River.
Yeah.
Now you say you're lonely.
Speaking of history, how did the two of you meet and become a duo?
Well, that's an interesting story. Should I tell it? Do you want to tell it?
You know the great guitar player Phil Fest?
Yes.
Phil Fest is our Cupid.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So is
Vai lá.
Jobim. So is Jobim.
Vai lá, Momo.
So I had booked a show. It was actually a wedding. It was a wedding. And I needed somebody who could play Bossa Nova. Now, I play a little guitar. I did pick up the guitar when I was 14 years old. My grandfather gave me one. But, I played nicely, but I couldn't play 2 or 3 hours of Antonio Carlos Jobim, beautifully. So I was looking for a guitar player.
Yes, you can.
Well, now I play a little more than I played then, too. Now I'm playing again, but I went through a little break, so I had 2 daughters.
Oh, I see.
So I went through a moment that I was not as involved.
Yeah.
And then it was funny because it was exactly when I decided I really need to play more music. Like, this is it. I had my second baby, was almost done breastfeeding, which was hard to breastfeed and play shows. So I couldn't exactly. So I was waiting for that. And then so when she, at 13 months, I said, okay, I'm going back and I'm going to play some music because that's what I really love doing.
You've got that drive in you. That
passion, so I'm going to do that, So the moment I said that, the universe conspired for me to meet Nate. But the way it happened was I had this wedding gig, and I was like, I really need a guitar player that can, play this music. So I called Phil Fast. I knew Phil.
Gotcha.
And so I said, Phil, want to play this gig with me? It's going to be great. But, I really want us to rehearse. Because I didn't want to play somebody's wedding with an unrehearsed trio that I had never played with and ruin their special day. So, so Phil, rightfully so, didn't want to come rehearse because he lives in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
So he's like, that's a little far for me to. But I have a friend who's a great guitar player and really knows this music, and he lives right by you. I'm like, who? It's like Nate Najar. I'm like, wow, okay, that's awesome. So I sent Nate a message on Facebook Messenger. He said, hey, Phil Fast told me about you. Want to meet up? Like, I wanted just to talk to him, right, to see what he knew and what he was about. So we met at Panera Bread.
All good things happen.
Wait, hang on. I got to jump in. I called Phil. And I said, who's this Daniela girl? Do I want to accept this invitation? Because you were in town, but I had never heard your name. And, I was kind of fairly busy all over town, right? And so I was like, who's? He says, well, it's just because she does Brazilian gigs, like in the Brazilian community. That's why you don't know her. She's great. You're going to love her. You're going to have a great time. She's cool. And so then I said, cool, let's get together,
That's right.
Yeah.
So we met at Panera Bread.
Did you get the take 2? You picked 2?
Half
soup, half salad?
No, what did I have? We used to have a broccoli cheddar soup, right?
Yeah.
And some salad of some sort.
There you go.
Yeah. No, that day I only had a tomato soup, and you had nothing. I remember that.
I had coffee.
Yeah, he had coffee, and I had a tomato soup. But, so we talked about music and the repertoire.
I remember every song you mentioned, you knew every word. You knew every word. You knew every melody. I'm talking Jobim tunes. I'm talking Caetano tunes. I'm talking things with some real, they're not American pop tunes. They're things with real intervallic stuff happening. And you were just sitting at the table, and we'd mention them, and you go, oh, yeah, that one. Da, da, da. And and it wasn't just the arc of the line. Every note was perfect. You're just kind of just humming it under your breath as we're talking about tunes. And, we must have talked about 50 tunes that afternoon. And just the breadth of and the reason, she's Brazilian, you expect this, but my experience meeting young Brazilians, the classic, the old stuff, the stuff I knew, because I came to it from a jazz concept. I came to it from Charlie Bird, and I discovered Bossa. So, I only knew the old stuff. I didn't know a lot about the popular music. And so somebody, Daniela's age, to be sitting here and discussing this stuff with me, and she knows it better than I know it, and that's not been my experience even meeting Brazilians, it was so eye-opening and so remarkable. It was, what a special that moment was so special to me.
Amor. Yeah. It was cool. And so then Nate said, "Oh, after we talked about it, he's like, oh, you wanna? I have, I have a studio nearby. You wanna come to the studio?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Yes, let's do it." So I had not heard Nate play yet.
Okay.
And that was probably a good thing because when we got to the studio, he handed me a guitar and he said, "Can you play me something?" And I think if I knew how Nate played, I would have probably been really intimidated.
You played that Adriana Calcanhoto tune.
I played an Adriana Calcanhoto song.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
And
that guitar never sounded so. You played my Kono. That was the guitar.
Yeah.
I got a 1959 Kono. It's just like a Hauser. It's amazing. I got it in London, and I remember you played that guitar. It never sounded so good.
So then, shortly after, Nate invited me to sing on one of his holiday shows. It was like a Brazilian Christmas song, and I was like, wow, yeah, of course, that's gonna be fun at the Palladium. And then he said, "I'd like to produce an album for you," and I said, "Yeah, let's do it. This is what I want to be doing anyway. This is I had just said, right? Yeah. I'm going back to music now."
And that's
so
is that a moment?
A moment
Yeah.
of you,
A moment
exactly.
of you.
So that's our very first record that Nate produced, and then we started meeting. So obviously I had young kids at the time. They're still young, but not as young. But they were in school a certain period of time. So when we were working on this album, every day I would show up at 10 in the morning in the studio, and at 2:30 I had to go to get the kids. So we recorded that album like that, and of course we also went to New York and did a few other things. But and then as things started. As we started playing more Bossa Nova together, we fell in love.
Eu quero samba feito só pra mim, acabar, me virar, me espalhar. Eu quero a melodia sempre assim. Quero samba, quero samba, quero samba porque
What's it like to have that kind of relationship and work together? How do you know when you're on that same wavelength as one another?
I find it amazing. We always are. I find it amazing. Yeah. See, here's the thing. I think that it depends on the kind of compatibility between the couple, right? Nate and I, we enjoy each other's companies. I enjoy his company more than I enjoy anybody else's company. You know
likewise.
what I mean?
It's almost like a deep friendship.
Yeah. It started that way. If you think about it, we worked for months before we realized we've eventually fell in love. But it was like we weren't trying to impress anybody. We were not looking for anything. And so you just get to be yourself, right? And I think that's the best way to meet somebody. Definitely. It's very organic.
Yeah. But it endures.
But yeah, we enjoy, and the cool thing is we have all these adventures together, like going on the road together, going to different countries and playing different shows. Oh, baby, I'm sorry I messed up that song, or oh, that one felt really nice, or this sound person is great. Oh, that sound person is like not in a good mood. Whatever. You have so many, you have so much. So many adventures and so much history that you built together in a very short period of time. Yeah. It feels like we've been together 30 years because of how much life we've lived together. We have the same tastes when it comes to many things.
Across the board.
Yeah, music, food, environments, thoughts, ideas, It's really cool. And the fact that he's American and I'm Brazilian, we also teach about each other's cultures. And I'm still learning. I've been here 22 years and I'm like, what? How does that work? So, and Nate's the same thing. He's been to Brazil multiple times. We went to Carnival last year. All right. So we've had a lot of experiences there too, where he also got to learn a lot more. He already know about the music, but now he got to learn about the culture and what the place really feels like, the food and all that. So we got lucky. I feel like this is a lucky, I am very grateful to have met Nate.
It was absolutely meant to be. It's the only thing that you could say about it, really.
Yeah.
Serendipity.
Yeah. For sure.
Really, I got to tell you something that's really, because I'm such a nerd. This just remarkably special for me, and we were California last year, and walking through San Diego Airport, and I looked over, and she's got her guitar on her back, and her little thing, and I got my guitar and my little thing, right, and we're just walking. I look over, and I saw her carrying that damn guitar, and it's like, yeah. You know, how lucky am I that I get to do this with this lady?
Yeah.
And she's got her own guitar, right? You know, we're around the house, and she picks up the guitar, because his guitar's on all the walls. You just pick one up and play it, right? And she picks up, and she'll sit on the couch or on the floor or on the bed or wherever, and she'll start playing something. And it's just the most magnificent sound that just comes at you from it. And the thing is, I've got one of Charlie Bird's guitars. I've got his 1972 Ramirez, and I've got this guitar that this wonderful luthier made for me. That it's one that I played today. It's the guitar I play, and it's based on one of my old vintage Brazilian guitars that she found for me. That was like the Bodding Powell guitar, and we've got all these kind of really special instruments because I'm a guitar head, so they're special to me. Yeah. But I don't know what they sound like. If you think about it, you play the guitar, your relationship to the sound of it is from this perspective, but the sound's going that way.
Yeah.
I have no idea what they sound like. And then Daniela picks up a guitar and she plays it. Wow. Baby, play some more. Wow. I mean, it's so amazing.
Yeah, at night we just play guitar for each other.
That's beautiful.
It's great.
That's so beautiful.
So yeah, that's why our duo act is called Love and Bossa Nova, because that's literally our life.
Yeah.
And that's what we like to spread.
And I would love to talk more about Love and Bossa Nova. Could you just talk more about the conception of it and what this tour consists of?
Yes. So in 2020, we had a show scheduled at the Palladium that had to be canceled because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so when that happened, Nate had the ideas like, we can't play the live show anymore, but why don't we just play just the two of us from our balcony? So we live in a condo in downtown St. Pete, and we have this gorgeous view of downtown. So he said, let's just play a show for the people anyway. It's just going to have to be on a live stream. Yeah. But let's do it here. So that was so much fun, and everybody loved it. Like, we had a really great response online. So we decided to make it a weekly live stream that we named Love and Bossa Nova. And every Friday at 7:30 in the evening, we would go online live and play an hour-long show.
Oh, wow.
And it just became a little tradition that lasted about 18 months.
Yeah, 58 weeks.
58 weeks?
We did 58 weeks.
And the interesting thing about it is that for the first 11 weeks, we didn't repeat one song.
Oh.
So it was cool because it kept us, building an hour-long show. Yeah. An hour-long show with repertoire for an hour, and every week we did something completely different. So it really also got us to learn a new repertoire and get all this repertoire really tight. And so we kept on working on our craft, and everybody online just loved it. They shared it, and we kind of got a significant following of these live streams until today. We have people who come to a show and say, you guys got us through the pandemic, which is really sweet, because really they got us through the pandemic.
Yeah.
But, people come and say, we watched your live stream. And
you helped each other.
Yeah, so that was really, really
Lee
nice.
Mertner on Jazz Times, he wrote a really nice article about us. It was really nice of him to do that, on the Love and Bossa Nova thing, and Jazz Times published it.
That's right, Jazz Times published that. And then as soon as we could play live shows, we started getting invitations to play as a duo because of the live streams. So that became a thing, but those are the beginnings. That was the beginning of Love and Bossa Nova. And then ever since then, we've played all around the U.S. We've played in Europe a few times and continue to do so.
We played in South America.
We
went
played
to
in
Colombia.
Brazil. We played in Colombia. That's right. We've played everywhere.
Yeah.
So and we want to play more places.
Yeah, it's really, and I'll tell you, being on tour, just the two of us, is absolutely amazing. It's easy to get around because it's just the two of us, right? So it's two guitars, two of us, two suitcases, and it's one hotel room. Sound checks are a breeze. We use 3 microphones on the gig. We're all. Sound checks are so quick. It doesn't matter what the room is. The sound is good, so we present well. It's and then we're together.
Yeah.
It's just so special.
There's
So, yeah.
definitely this deeper intimacy that comes from playing together, touring together, being together. That doesn't happen often, but it seems like when it does, it's just magnetic and just superb.
That's
kind of
right.
feeling.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
Well, you know how it manifests that I find really satisfying, and I'm unbelievably grateful for it, is that when we're playing together, in terms of the musical phrasing, we always land together. In terms of the time and how it moves and how the phrasing moves, we land together. If there's a hole, if there's a fermata, if there's something, and then there's a we breathe together when we play. And
You did that today in the studio session, for sure.
it's, it doesn't matter the situation. It's just Daniela and I play together, and everything else is, it's really wild. It's really wild.
Yeah.
What's next for you?
What's next? We have a lot of shows coming up in the U.S. and in Europe, so I'll do it in order. This week, we have 2 shows in Florida. One is tomorrow at the Palladium Theater in St. Pete, April 23rd at 8 o'clock. And we're going to have our full band that was here today. And tomorrow, the same band is going to Boca Raton.
All
And
right.
so we're going to play there on Thursday, April 24th at Boca Black Box. And we have a couple of things. We have a Orlando show in Orlando, another duo show in St. Pete. Then we are going to, we have Philadelphia, New York, California. I'm most likely missing something. It's a very busy
going to
list.
Texas.
We're going to Texas. That's right, West Texas. So actually, you can check out all the shows on my website, DanielaSoledade.com. And then you can see the true full list.
And Deco Tropical.
Deco Tropical.
May 9th
That's
is
right.
the release date for the full album, Deco Tropical, which is this band. There's a few original things, a few Soledade things. You do on every album. Daniela does one of her tunes, one of her grandfather's tunes, and one of her father's tunes. But you've got a few of your tunes, not just one. But anyway, and then there's a few of the tunes have been released digitally as singles, up to it. But about half the record is not out yet. But May 9th, the whole album comes out, Deco Tropical.
Deco Tropical.
And that's really exciting because it's really cool.
Sorry, amor.
No, just I like the way it
Yeah.
sounds.
No, it's great. We had so much fun recording. And I was going to say, if you go on Spotify and you look up my name, Daniela Soledade, it actually has like a countdown now. It's a new thing there. They put a countdown. So they show all the singles that have been released that you can already listen. And then the other ones that have not been released and the countdown for the whole album to come out on May 9th. But of course, it's not just on Spotify. It's going to be on all the streaming platforms. And so that's Deco Tropical. And we also have another album that's almost ready with the band. And we really can't wait to record our very first duo album, our very first Love and Bossa Nova album. So that's a project we have plans to complete this year.
Hey, thanks for listening. Be sure to visit WUSFjazz.org to watch local jazz performances, find jazz events through Florida, listen to curated Spotify playlists, and a whole lot more. WUSFjazz.org. Today's audio was recorded by Jackson Harp. Production assistance by Chandler Balcom. I'm Warren Buckles, host and editor. The Studio Sessions podcast is a product of WUSF and is sponsored by Community Foundation Tampa Bay with support from the Palladium, the Gobia Foundation, and by you. Thank you for your support. Learn more about jazz and Arts Axis Florida by visiting our website at WUSFjazz.org. Copyright 2025 WUSF.